I was always like a little delay when I start this thing, and it says it's testing the broadcast, and when I go back and look, I don't know if it's live or not. So,
Well, I haven't gotten an update saying that we're
okay,
going on
we're
there now.
live now.
Okay.
We're live now. All right, everybody, welcome to another exciting episode of Under the Dome. I'm your host, Alan Orick, here with my partner, Sean Williams. How you doing tonight, Sean?
I'm mad as hell, and you?
I I'm over being mad. Now I'm just frustrated.
Yeah.
I'm
It
getting feedback. What am I?
there's a lot of different things, a lot of different layers, which we'll get into this shortly in the show. But there's several things that I'm really mad about as far as the game Sunday. There's some things that are just incredibly frustrating about the way that the game played out. Just every, I was really shocked though after the fact that all of the talking heads they talked about what a great game it was,
Mm-hmm.
and even the man that loves the sound of his own voice more than anyone else in the world, Deion Sanders, he said that there's absolutely no sign of no reason for alarm for the New Orleans Saints. They lost a close game, and I was really shocked by
Well, that's why I said I was mad that night because I felt there were too many opportunities where we had the chance to put this game away and we missed it. And I thought Mike Shanahan put together probably the greatest game plan ever
that.
to play
I
the
can agree with
Saints.
that.
He totally flipped the script on the Saints. The Saints obviously practiced and prepared for a team that was going to come in there and just run the ball down their throats and dare them to try and stop them, thinking their defense could beat our defense. Their defense can also beat our offense, and they were going to win a 20-17 kind of ball game, especially in another stadium. Instead, what Shanahan put together was we're going to fling this ball all over the field, make this defense defend every blade of synthesized grass, and see if they can keep up with us. Because we're convinced that we can score 100 points on this defense, but we don't think the Saints can match that against our defense. And that's the kind of game it was.
Yeah,
And they were mostly right.
yeah. I I give all the credit in the world to San Francisco, and this is this isn't the same thing as a few weeks ago when we lost the game to the Atlanta Falcons. This is a really good team. They were just as good as advertised,
Yep.
and I give, like you say, I give complete and total credit to the coaching staff for putting together, and well, not just putting together, but also executing a flawless game plan. It and there is one of the excuse me excuse me. There's one of the frustrating things about this game
Mm-hmm.
because even with all that being said, anytime that you can score 46 points on the number one defense in the league, uh, you should win that game.
Yeah.
Um, I, our defense is much better than what you saw on the field. Now, part of that is us, and part of that is, as there again, that game plan. They kept us off balance the whole time, and it's our. It was frustrating to me to know to look back at the early part of the year when the defense was winning games for us, and uh, we couldn't stop anything that they did.
Yeah.
That just that that's maddening.
Well, they definitely thought they could beat up on Eli Apple, and they did it. Um, they liked their matchups with Marcus Williams. They exploited that. They liked what they saw out of the linebacker position, given that Kiko Alonso and AJ Klein were out, so they attacked that. Um, but keep in mind, this was also a masterful game plan by Sean Payton and Drew Brees. They did the same thing to that defense. We sacked Garoppolo, what, 3 times?
Yeah.
They didn't sack Brees at all. They did get to him 1 time, and of course it was it was called off by a save by a defensive holding penalty. But for the most part, the Saints kept Drew Brees pretty clean the whole game, and he could just pick his targets. Garoppolo threw for 349 yards. Brees threw for 349 yards. They were down at one point by 9 points. They took the lead in less than 4 minutes. So and that's why I was picturing this in this episode. Had Cook not gone down with that concussion, I think Brees could have thrown another 2 touchdowns because they weren't stopping Cook. They had no answer for Cook. And that leads to my discussion that I'm going to talk to you about later on tonight about Kamara and giving Latavius Murray more carries. My theories on why that didn't happen, and the impact of losing Cook, although on the surface it didn't look like it was much of an impact. As the game progressed, it became an impact on the team.
Now we can get into this a little more in depth if you would like to, but also the thing that maybe frustrated me the most, I don't remember right off the top of my head a game where the Saints came out and were just, everything that they touched, everything that they called, everything that they ran was just flawlessly executed the way that they did in the first half of this game.
Yeah.
And at halftime, you had Latavius Murray averaging 9 yards every time he touched the ball. And mysteriously, he disappears in the second half. I don't understand why we got away from what was working so well. Now you can correct me if I'm mistaken or wrong here. I don't see that San Francisco took anything away from us as far as what we were doing offensively.
Okay. If you go back and watch the game, and I don't really recommend anybody go back and watch the game, but you can. In the third quarter, Charles Davis makes an observation. He said that, and I haven't looked at the All-22 film, so I can't confirm this or not, but he said in the third quarter, you could see the 49ers defense creeping up and clamping down on a lot of stuff. They were bringing their safeties down. They were bringing their corners down to play more press coverage. They were daring the Saints to attack them deep. They were also bunching in the box to take away the inside running plays. If that is true, it explains 2 things. Number one, why Murray wasn't involved in the game more. And number 2, why the Saints were so insistent on these outside plays to Alvin Kamara. Because if these guys are creeping down and getting close to the line of scrimmage, Kamara only has to make one move, one cut, and he's in the open field and gone because there's nobody deep. And later on in the game, when Brees started attacking them deep, you saw them start to back up a little bit, or in that final drive, you saw the 49ers get out of that scheme entirely and started blitzing a lot more. So I think if with Cook out, and this goes to Murray as well, with Cook out, there was nobody to threaten the seam routes. So the safeties were sitting on top of the receivers. We weren't getting those big, nice crossing routes that the 49ers were clearly getting. We weren't getting those nice crossing routes because the 49ers were staying in the middle of the field, taking away all that stuff. So all that was left was the outside plays. So I think that's why Peyton went away from Murray and started focusing more on Kamara, on those outside pitches and tosses and jet sweeps to Deontay Harris and plays like that, trying to get outside, trying to get around the speed of that defense, but Bosa and the corners were too fast. But trying to get that one move, and then they're gone.
Yeah.
And I think if you started Cook in the game, and Cook was attacking the seams, and they had nobody that could match up with him speed-wise, the 49ers changed their defense and play much more of an open defense where you saw much more production out of Murray. That's just my theory.
There were so many things about this game that gave me flashbacks to 2011.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Obviously, the play that ended the game. But let me ask you this, and I don't ask you this because I'm a conspiracy theorist, but I ask you this because I've been asked this quite a few times.
Mm-hmm.
If you remember back in the first, I want to say maybe the first drive of that game in 2011, the headhunter shot that put Pierre Thomas out.
Mm-hmm.
Do you consider what they did to Cook the same thing?
Well, Cook was coming down after jumping up to catch the ball. So, Breeze put it up high. It was an incredibly athletic catch. But I don't consider it so much headhunting the way I considered what happened to Pierre Thomas. Pierre Thomas looked like headhunting. I mean, he led with the crown of the helmet. What he did is illegal now. The rules back then were if you were a runner and you lower your helmet, you're not in a defenseless position. They've changed that now. I think anytime you touch anybody in the head now, it's considered a penalty.
The guy that perpetrated that hit on Pierre Thomas, he was a punk anyway.
Oh, yeah, that was the old Buffalo Bills safety. I can't think of his name right now.
I will not remember for the life of me. But he was a bum. He's a dirty player, and he was a mouthy, dirty player. So he's not on my Christmas card list.
Oh, yeah.
Never has been.
Deontay Winter. I think, or Minter. Let me see. 49ers
no, it wasn't Minter. Oh, man.
It'll come to me. I'm Googling it right now because and as soon as I see his name, I'll know who he is.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, Dante Winter. Dante Winter. That's who it was, number 26, a strong safety. Yeah, he was a punk. Whitner.
Yeah. As long as we're on that play, let's get it settled once and for all. There has been so much said and done by everyone, up to and including apparently a butcher at Rouse's. Do you agree with the 2-point conversion? First,
yes,
I do too.
You get
I
the ball.
think it was the right call to make because you had the ball on the 1-yard line.
Yep. You have no idea how this game's going to play out at that point. You have no idea how many points you're going to need to win this ball game. So you take the opportunity to score any points you can. What I find
have no issue whatsoever with him calling that 2-point conversion, given the situation.
Right.
I would have made the same call.
Right. I may have disagreed with the play they ran, but if we get the 2 points on that play, no one says anything. What I find ironic about this, all these people bitching about the 2-point conversion play, because you had to go for 2 later on, because you missed that one. These are the same people who are saying that Traquan Smith should have gone out of bounds at the 5 or the 1 or whatever, so we could burn more time off so the 49ers couldn't get the ball back. Now,
that's absolutely asinine because
I know it is.
You go out of bounds, there's no guarantee that you're going to get that ball in the end zone.
Well, yeah, you go out of bounds, you stop the clock. So if you go down at the 1, you needed a touchdown to take the lead. Yeah, it's no guarantee you're going to get that touchdown. We saw both 2-point conversions, one from the 1 and one from the 2. You didn't get it. There's no guarantee. You take the points wherever you can.
Exactly.
You have to do that. Yeah, it is. It's completely stupid and asinine to even think that. But
yeah,
it's 2020 hindsight. We lost by 2, so our defense couldn't stop anybody, so we should have let the offense run the clock out. They couldn't, because the 49ers had 3 timeouts.
Yeah.
It wasn't like they were out of timeouts and couldn't stop the clock, because then you could try 4 chances to win the game. They can't stop the clock. But with 3 timeouts, you may have burnt 15 to 20 seconds off that clock. So they get it at 33 seconds, 43 seconds. They still got down the field because of the penalty. They were on our 14-yard line. It's still 4th and 2. None of it makes sense. You can't think that way. You have to think, I got to score the points. I got to get the points.
Yeah.
You only go down if you've got the lead or it's tied and you can kick the field goal for the win. That's the only time you do that.
Completely agree.
It's just it's foolish. I understand the thinking that you don't want to put your defense back out there, but given that you're behind by 5 points, you can't afford not to. Yeah. You have to score those points. So
okay.
I agree with every call he made, except for not running Murray a little bit more in the second half when clearly the outside plays weren't working. And I think the absence of Zach Line impacted that as well. Yeah. Because you don't have that fullback in there banging people's heads. So Kamara or Murray can go off that block and get to the second level.
Okay, I can't believe that yet again. Just for the record, I would like to say that it turns my stomach the amount of time on this show that we have had to put towards discussing the state of officiating in this league.
Yeah.
It's beyond maddening.
Well,
it's like a joke that isn't even funny anymore.
Yeah. Ed Werder probably had the best Twitter or tweet of all time. He said, if you want to learn obscure new rules to the game, watch a Saints game.
Yeah.
I look at the non-pass interference and holding on the gunner on the fake punt the same way I look at the tuck rule. Is it a rule? Yes. I know people are running that footage of the Arizona Cardinals running that fake punt, but that's not the gunner who actually goes and gets the pass interference call. If you watch the play, the gunner actually takes off and runs a loop around, and then you see the guy who's in the backfield take off. That's Farrah Cooper, I think. Take off. He's the up back. He takes off and goes and runs the route like a gunner, but he doesn't get, and I think there's still somebody outside, but he draws a pass interference call.
Well, I mean, if that was the only call, that would be one thing.
Mm-hmm.
The targeting on Gardner Johnson.
Yeah.
The guy went into a convulsion, apparently, because he hit him. First of all, he didn't even hit his head, or excuse me, he didn't hit that guy with his head. And he was to flopping around like LeBron James in the free throw lane.
Yeah.
Okay. And the next series, he's out there catching passes.
Yeah, I know. He sold it. And I've seen more games where a play like that isn't called. But, it's one of those positions where he almost should have just jumped and spread his arms out like he was in Mid-South Wrestling and landed on him. Like Mid-South Wrestling. It's the only way you could have done it.
Now, let me be perfectly clear on my position on this. I am not in any way, shape, form, or fashion whatsoever saying that the referees cost us that game.
Yeah.
I am not saying that at all. I am saying that they suck at their jobs. Still.
Yeah.
And the level of ineptitude. And it, as I posted on Facebook that at the time, and I have to allow that my blood pressure was really high when I made that post too, by the way. It's not just, this isn't being said as a homer bitching about his team losing. That's not it at all. Look at around the league. Every game that I watch has what could be considered a game-defining officiating moment. The Patriots the other night, there were, 2 calls that worked against them?
Mm-hmm.
When we reach the point that they're making egregious calls against the Patriots,
it's what I said the other night. It was a couple of weeks ago in this show. There's so many rules now that a judgment calls, and there's such inconsistency in the way they're interpreted and enforced. In the first half, we had no penalties. The 49ers had I think 4 or 5 penalties. And the 49ers actually had more penalties than we did. But it was when our penalties were called, or when the 49ers penalties were called, it seemed like, both of those calls on Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, the holding on third down and the helmet-to-helmet contact on third down, they're technically correct. But it was just, call that consistently throughout the game. Call the holding on their defensive backs, on our receivers, consistently throughout the game. If you're going to call holding on us on plays, you got to call holding on their players. I look for that consistency.
Exactly. And I'm going right back to the NFC Championship game a year ago.
Yeah.
I don't think that it should be too much to expect. The players in the NFL are the very highest at their chosen profession. That's the highest level that you can attain.
Mm-hmm.
The officiating should be too. It should not be too much to expect to have the game decided by those men on the field.
Well, you like I said, you almost need a person in New York or a person in the stadium watching the game, and he can buzz down to the officials and say, "Hey, I think you missed something. Let's go back and look. There's something," just like they do in college football. These are the calls you should have gotten. But they just didn't do it. They don't do it. And I get it. The speed of the game is so much greater. These officials are not full-time officials. Then they don't have the experience either. They're getting the experience. But it seems like every week in every game, the guy I watch, Urinating Tree, over there on YouTube, he calls it ref ball. He says at some point ref ball happens because this in one game is this, but in another game it's not. And he'll lay it out side by side every time and show you this. What constitutes pass interference? What constitutes holding? What is this? What is this? Is this helmet to helmet? Then why isn't this helmet to helmet? And if we can see that, that means you need to have somebody who takes his ego out of the equation and says, you know what? Yeah, we blew that call. Let's try and get it right on the field. Instead of this circling the wagons and thou shalt not criticize the officiating, and we always get it right, and if we get it wrong on Monday, our bad, it wouldn't have changed the outcome of the game. It's not so much it's not changing the outcome of the game, but it's affecting the outcome of the game. And that's the difference. Whether or not a team wins or loses, except for the NFC Championship game, whether or not a team wins or loses doesn't generally come down to officiating. But whether or not a team has an opportunity to win the game does come down to the officiating a lot of times at critical moments, because, as I've been saying all year long, every game in the NFL is decided by about a handful of plays. 5 or 6 plays. We can go into this game. 5 or 6 things, if they happen differently, is a different outcome in the game. So if one of those 5 or 6 plays is the result of ref ball, that's huge, because that's something that's beyond your control. Because it's the judgment of the official that was a penalty and this wasn't. So that's what bugs me.
I'm just, I'm not trying to be one of those pissing and moaning people. I'm really not. You had the 2 best teams in the NFC lined up head to head, and they played their hearts out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that should be enough. Somebody going into this game Sunday, there was only one thing that was for certain. Somebody was going to win and somebody was going to lose. I can take my team losing to a team that played better.
Yeah.
And like there again, going back to the Atlanta game. Atlanta beat us because they outplayed us, outcoached us. I don't think that you could necessarily say that about San Francisco. In the first quarter, I said, this is looking a whole lot like it's going to come down to whoever has the ball last.
Yeah,
and it did.
What bugs me about some of the fans' reactions is this was a 10-2 team with the number 1 rated defense in the league, and some people are acting like we lost to the Bengals or the Dolphins, and because of the way they're reacting to the defense. They got good players too, and they have a good coaching staff too, and they are going to do things. These are the kind of games they win. Okay? But people acting like we've got a complete dumpster fire for a ball club. And we really don't. We won 10 games. And we weren't lucky that we won 10 games. It didn't take... This was not the 2013 Saints that got exposed by Seattle. Or got exposed and humiliated by Dallas that year. This was a team, and this is another thing, it was so damn ironic. This was a game where we were told we weren't this kind of team anymore. Allison said this game was 2011 Breeze. It was. I mean, Breeze, we had the arm truthers 2 weeks ago against Carolina telling us, yeah, Breeze can't throw that deep ball anymore. Look at him underthrowing that. He's old. He's declining. He doesn't have the arm strength. Look what he did this Sunday. I mean, he was flinging that ball all over the place.
Look at his stat line.
Yeah, he's being
Quarterback
chased
rating.
down by Joey Bosa, who's probably going to win Defensive Rookie of the Year. Breeze outruns him and then throws a ball down the field in almost like a jump pass. No setting his feet. It was all arm, and he got the ball and hit him right in stride. It's just it was vintage Drew Brees, and unfortunately, because it was a loss, it's something that a lot of people aren't going to remember. But this was a guy who 2 weeks ago again had the worst receiving core he's ever had, and yet he threw for 49 yards and 5 touchdowns. I mean, it was amazing to watch out there. And if we could have got one more possession, I have no doubt, zero doubt, we score again. I
agree.
The 49ers just happened to be the last team with the ball. But there was no way that 49ers team was stopping Drew Brees. I don't care who they had on the field. All those first-round draft picks at defensive line, all that stuff, the great defensive coordinator gets all into it, beat the crap out of Aaron Rodgers, but Drew Brees just tore them a new one in front of everybody. So it's just...
I do believe that coming out of this game, and this may be kind of a bold statement, but I think that there was a lot more things to look at positively than to be upset or disappointed about.
Yeah, well, some negative stuff came out today, but about Davenport and maybe Sheldon Rankins, but that's something we'll talk about in a minute. But here's one more thing I want to throw out there, too. I watched, after that Saints 49ers game, I watched most of that Patriots Chiefs game. Let me tell you something. You want to see somebody who's old? You want to see somebody who is a declining player? Tom Brady right now.
Yep.
I see a declining, and yeah, he doesn't have great receivers right now, but I see declining arm strength. I see declining accuracy. That's a guy who's showing his age. Now, that's compared to his usual standards. Right now, he looks like an above-average starting quarterback in the NFL compared to the elite player he has been. Drew Brees...
What you're seeing with Tom Brady is, for the first time maybe ever, you're seeing Tom Brady on an island. He's by himself. He has no talent around him. Well, he's got Edelman.
Yeah, he's got Edelman. But he doesn't, even with just Edelman, and now he's got Sanu out there. But even with those two guys, he doesn't look like the Tom Brady I'm used to seeing, who finds a way to put that ball in the place it needs to be all the time. He struggles. He struggles to push it downfield. He struggles to do a lot of the things that people were saying about Drew Brees 3 weeks ago. Yesterday, or Sunday, you could have put that game in a time machine and thought that was the not 70. You thought that was a 2015 Giants Saints game, or the 2011 Breeze, or the 2009 Breeze, or even 2007, 2008 Breeze. You wouldn't have thought that was a 40-year-old man slinging that ball around like that against Garoppolo, matching him, for big play for big play.
So, tell me this. Have we underestimated Garoppolo?
I did, because I said before the game started, we need to shut down the run and make Garoppolo beat us with his arm. I don't think he can, because I didn't think he was that kind of quarterback. But sure enough, he came out there and played like he's that kind of quarterback. That was probably his best game as a pro. Whether he can do that consistently, I don't know. I really don't know. I think the Saints it was a twofold thing. It was an outstanding game plan by Shanahan, and it was a lousy game plan by Dennis Allen because he expected a certain kind of thing to happen. It didn't happen. Shanahan flipped the script on them, and they were woefully unprepared for that. I also think he blew his load in that game. I'm talking about Shanahan. He pulled out every trick play in the book. Well, that's now out on film. That doesn't mean he can't come up with new ones, but it does mean that the Saints are better prepared if they have to face this team in a rematch. Better prepared for some of the things they will probably pull out against us. So,
yeah, because if things play out the way that we're all expecting them to, we will see this team again.
Yeah. The challenge is going to be now who is going to make the team on defense for us, because the rumor is, it's not officially announced by the Saints, but the rumor is, based on Twitter, Marcus Davenport hurt his foot, and in such a way he's probably going to be put on IR. They brought in Noah Spence, Shane Ray, and somebody else today to work them out to see if they're going to sign anybody. And then I saw from John Hendricks, Sheldon Rankins got hurt, and he may not be back. So that's two huge blows, and probably the strength of the defense, the defensive line. The good news is we're seeing a lot of growth out of Shy Tuttle. We've seen on Yamada play, there are some opportunities for other players to step in for a while and fill some of that void. You just don't get your depth in your rotation that you wanted. So how do they handle that? I don't know. We'll see that when they officially announce, probably tomorrow, any roster moves they have to make.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not good, but how they recover from those injuries, depending on who they sign and what they do schematically, I mean, that's going to really shape the defense. I don't think, and we'll throw this out there because I was looking for Calvin to come on, but I guess Calvin's busy tonight. I don't think Eli Apple and Marcus Williams are as bad as they looked Sunday.
I just told someone a few minutes ago. They asked me what was going on with Eli Apple, and kind of jokingly, I said he needed to pull his head out of his behind and do his job, because Eli Apple is much better player. We've seen it already this year and last. He's a much better player than what he's exhibiting on the field.
Yep.
And I can't help but wonder if Lattimore is completely 100%, because he's not playing up to expectations.
Last week was his first game back.
Let me ask you this, to kind of go in a different direction for a moment. Is it safe to say now that Alvin Kamara is not the Alvin Kamara that we've come to know and love?
That's been the topic of conversation a lot on Saints Twitter. And they've been throwing the stats up showing that Kamara, while his production was down since the Jacksonville game, it still was high. But this was probably his worst game as a pro. I think he's playing like a guy who's still got a sore knee and a bad ankle, and he can't cut like he used to. The other thing that's happening is, if you watch 2017 and 2018, the way people were tackling Alvin Kamara, they were tackling him high. They were trying to catch him by the shoulders. They were tackling him at the waist, trying to bring him down. And he would slide off all those tackles and hits and get extra yardage. What I'm seeing now is people diving at his ankles. And he's not able to get out of that.
Yeah.
You know,
I've seen what amazed me most and impressed me the most about Alvin Kamara was his agility.
mm-hmm.
I mean, he could shake off hits with remarkable ease.
Yeah.
And you're not seeing that elusiveness that you once saw.
And that's why I think his ankle is still bothering him.
Yeah, I believe that he's playing hurt. Now,
He's
just
probably got it
exactly
heavily
how
wrapped.
hurt, I don't know about that.
Well, he's probably got it heavily taped. And that is preventing him from making the cuts, but it's also keeping him from re-injuring the ankle.
Yeah.
You know, one thing I do want to dispute is this attitude that people have. And again, it goes back to the Jimmy Graham shit and the Brandon Cook stuff. People are sitting there looking at Alvin Kamara saying, "Oh, his body language. He doesn't want to be here anymore. He you know, he's looking for a big contract and he's not going to get it, so he's not putting all the effort out. You know, he's not doing." And I just want to say, to borrow a favorite word of Jim Moore, I think that's a bunch of horse shit. Pure horse shit. That's people who are reading things in because they want to be Debbie Downers. They just want to be negative, and they just automatically assign behavior. You know, what they thought Jimmy Graham was like, what they thought Brandon Cooks was like. They just want to throw that on another guy because that makes for good Saints drama. It can't be really disproven because you can't disprove a negative. You know, so it makes for good social media fodder. Yeah. But I don't think that at all about Alvin Kamara. I think he is just simply, he's hurt. And he's playing through it. Because he knows the team needs him. He wants to be out there to do that. Getting paid, that's, players compartmentalize things. Players do not go out there with the attitude of, man, I got to do this to get paid. I got to do great players don't. Average players do. Great players don't think like that unless they're totally selfish. And I don't think Kamara's selfish
at all.
It's just I think in his mind the contract and stuff, all that's going to take care of itself when that happens. I'm not worried about that right now. I just need to play because my team needs me. And I want to be out there to help this team win. I don't like being on the sidelines. And he's pushing himself. And he's not the guy we used to seeing because he is hurt.
And I think that, you see a lot of reference to the fact that Ingram's no longer there. And I think that there may be a small part of that may be true. It's a completely different dynamic that he's going to have, that he has had to adjust to.
You're not getting Kamara's never been an extrovert. Ingram is. Ingram's an extrovert. So if you remember those interviews with Ingram and Kamara, it's Ingram going, "Come here. We're gonna do this interview together," and Ingram was the one kind of pulling Kamara out of his shell to talk and act up. But if you read the interview that was in Sports Illustrated, I think it was a couple years ago when he was a rookie, they talk about how he has a very close circle and he puts walls up around him that you can't get in unless you're in that circle. So for people to sit there and try and read shit about him based on body language and how he acts with the media and stuff like that, you didn't read that article then about him and the kind of person he is. That's just who he is. Ingram helped his personality, but you don't have that extrovert out there kind of pushing him into the spotlight with him, with the extrovert to get him to talk. So I'm sorry, I just jumped all over what you were saying, but go ahead. What you were saying before?
No, that you're just solidifying the statement that I was making.
Yeah.
It's been a totally new and different dynamic that he's had to adjust to.
Yeah.
Now, do I think that it's caused him to completely check out from being a focal point in this offense? No, not at all.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of people are saying, that he's not as tuned in now because he doesn't have Ingram there with him.
Right.
And what I've been saying for weeks about how I wanted to see the Saints adjust their play calling to utilize Kamara and Murray at the same time. I think you saw that in the first half. And I was really happy to see that, and even more excited with the way that it worked out.
Yeah. Well, Allison my daughter commented that next week you're probably going to see a very pissed off Peyton and Breeze take out their frustrations on the Colts. And the Colts are reeling right now. So I think you'll probably see a lot more Murray in that game. And, people can read into that what they want to read. But that's how I see it coming. I mean, people.
Well, this season is not over by any stretch of the imagination, because you have, first of all, you have the Colts coming in that still have something to play for.
Yeah.
Then you have to play the Titans, who are definitely still in the mix in their division.
They have a chance of winning the division.
Yeah.
Because Houston can't help but shit the bed every other week.
Exactly.
They're one of the most frustrating teams. I would hate being a Houston Texans fan because they remind me of Jim Haslett's Saints. Beat the Patriots one week, lose to a terrible team the following week, and Denver, and get blown out by them at home. Yeah.
And I think you could say the same thing about the Rams.
Yep.
They seem to get up for games that if they think it's going to be an easy game, they don't get up for it, and it shows on the field.
Mm-hmm.
And then games that should be close, they seem to just jump all, like the game that I forget who they played this past Sunday.
Who's that?
The Rams.
The Rams? They beat Seattle.
Yeah. And that Seattle is a much better team than what you saw.
Yeah.
They get up for the games that they want to get up for. And that kind of inconsistency in your preparation, in your on-the-field product, that's the kind of stuff that gets you bounced out of the playoffs pretty quickly.
Yeah. And one last thing, speaking of the Rams, I'm going to kind of go through some of the scenarios that we have to pull for now. Yeah, my brother just mentioned they're talking about moving the Saints-Titans game, possibly flex to Sunday night that week, because that could be an important game, depending on what happens this weekend. Okay, so the number one seed is not dead and gone. It's harder. We need help, but it's not dead and gone. The most important game for Saints fans of the remaining 3 games, clearly all 3 games the Saints have to win, including the last game, Carolina. There's no Teddy time this time. It's, Breeze is going to play that game. The final game of the season is the 49ers going to Seattle to possibly, or more than, because Seattle lost Sunday, very likely the battle for who wins the NFC West. Okay? As a Saints fan, you want Seattle to win that game. And here's why. Because Seattle's got a loss now, you want the Saints, the 49ers, and Seattle all to finish with 13-3 records. Of course, the 49ers can finish with 12-4 records, even better. But you really want all 3 teams to finish with a 13-3 record. Because if Seattle beats the 49ers the last week of the season, they swept the 49ers. They've already beaten them once. They sweep the 49ers. They win the NFC West. Because they win the NFC West and we won the NFC South, that's the only head-to-head that matters. And we beat Seattle head-to-head. We now have the number 1 or number 2 seed. Okay? Stick with me. It doesn't matter that we lost to the 49ers in that scenario because they become a wild card team, and I don't care what your record is, wild card teams always travel to divisional champion teams. Think about 2010.
There's no way that you can be the number 1 seed without winning your division.
Right. Think about 2010. The Saints went 11-5. The Seattle Seahawks went 7-9. What happened? We had to go to Seattle because we were the 5th seed, the wild card team. Because the Falcons won that division that year. Okay? Seattle, as crappy as they were, won the NFC West with a 7-9 record. Here's the worst part. In 2010, we beat Seattle head-to-head. We beat them in the Dome that year. Seattle made a trade. They got from Buffalo Beast Mode. We tried to get Beast Mode earlier that year, and we were pissed off that Buffalo traded Lynch to Seattle because Seattle offered less than what the Saints were willing to offer for Marshawn Lynch. Lynch goes to Seattle. We all know what happened that day. Seattle won that game, but we at 11-5 had to travel to Seattle. What will be funny is the 49ers at 13-3 as the wild card team traveling to Dallas, because I'm assuming the Cowboys win that division because the Cowboys should beat the Eagles head-to-head. But traveling to Dallas to play the Cowboys, and the Cowboys are like a 7-9 team. That would be hilarious, but it's fitting. Okay. The other thing that has to happen for us to get that number 1 seed is Minnesota has to beat Green Bay in 2 weeks, because honestly, I can't see Trubisky and the Bears beating the Packers. And I can't see the Lions, as pathetic as they are, beating the Packers the last week of the season. I can see the Vikings beating the Packers because the Vikings need to win that game, because now the Rams are on their butts to get that 6th seed for the playoffs. So we want not this weekend coming up, but week 16, you got to pull for the Vikings, as painful as that is, because of what they did to us. You got to pull for the Vikings to beat the Packers. And then in week 17, you got to pull for the Seahawks to beat the 49ers. So those 2 things happen. We win outright. We're back to the number 1 seed at 13-3. That's pretty easy, huh?
Pretty much, yeah. But there again, the most important part of that entire equation, the Saints have to win out.
Yep. And honestly, I think they do. I think they beat the Colts next week because they're playing them at home. I think the Colts, for whatever reason, are reeling. I think Jacoby Brissett is he's kind of hit the wall. And for whatever reason, the Colts just are not, on defense, are not executing like they used to. So I think we should be able to win that game. It's the last home game, prime time. We're incredible in prime time. They're going to be bringing up the Super Bowl because it's 10 years ago, because that's all part of NFL 100. You're getting a lot of Super Bowl rematches, no matter how long ago they happened, during the season. Okay, you had the Packers and the Chiefs play. You had the Packers and the Raiders play. You always get the Jets and the Colts, but You had the Chiefs and the Vikings play, so you've seen a lot of Super Bowl rematches. Dallas and Miami played already. Um, so they're going to talk a lot about that Super Bowl, and that moment won't be lost on a team on Peyton and Breeze. The Titans game is going to be a very tough game. I'll be honest with you. I think we can get after the quarterback. I just drew a blank on his name. The ex-Miami Dolphins quarterback. No, not Fitzpatrick. The ex-Miami Dolphins quarterback. Huh?
Tannehill.
Yes, Ryan Tannehill. We can get after him. The final game of the season is Carolina. That's dead men walking. I think, especially because we're playing them in Carolina, jump on them early. They already got their locker room cleaned out. They got their shit on the bus already to go home. All we need to do is just push them out the door. And they'll probably flex, if that's not already set up, they'll probably have the Seattle 49ers game either Sunday night or Sunday afternoon at 3. We'll be finished waiting to watch that game to see where we end up. If we're the number 1 seed or number 3 seed. Because I'm assuming the Vikings beat the Packers.
I can't. I know that they have a great record and all. I can't see anything to lead me to believe that the Packers have even been challenged yet, which is a fancy way of saying that I don't know if they're as good as the record would lead you to believe.
Oh, I know they're not.
I know they're not. Anybody has pushed it yet.
I think anybody that's played the Packers, I've watched the Packers. Anybody that's good that's played them is beating the hell out of them, honestly.
Yeah.
So I think a desperate Vikings team that's trying to stay in the playoff race and trying to shuck that label of a loser, they might be. I'm not sure what the records are, but they may be competing to see who wins the division. I don't know if they have that ability or not, but I think they're too far behind. I think they got too many losses. But yeah, they're fighting for that 6th spot, and they don't want to miss out on the playoffs, especially as close as they are. They need to make that statement. So I think they beat the Packers. I honestly do. I think they beat the hell out of Rodgers.
Yeah, I agree.
My brother says the Bears can stop the Vikings from making the playoffs in the final game. That's possible, but I don't trust Trubisky to do it.
To be honest, to have been a Super Bowl favorite going into the season, the Bears are on life support.
Well, their offense is so limited, and I think that coach is. I described it last year. I thought he ran a lot of BS kind of plays, a lot of smoke and mirror. We're going to do a lot of misdirection and fool you. But at the end of the day, this is where we are. And I think teams just kind of caught on to that. And we're just like, you know what? Screw all that stuff. You got to come through one of these holes. We're just going to wait for you. And when you do, we're going to get you. And I think that's what happened to the Bears. I think that offense.
Well, they got a lot of mileage off of Khalil Mack.
Yeah.
And they also put on game film what he could do and what he couldn't do, and everybody has worked off of that, and they've made him a non-factor.
Well, yeah. They lost their defensive coordinator. He is now head coach of the Broncos. So that was one big hit they took, And the other thing is they've been ravaged by injuries, and Trubisky's regressed. So, yeah. Lance Kelly, welcome, Lance. Lance says the 49ers might lose their last 2 games. That's possible because they play the Rams the week before they play the Seahawks. But they play in Levi Stadium. I don't know what Rams team shows up.
Exactly.
The Rams team that runs the football and pounds the rock on the 49ers probably beats them. The Rams team that puts Jared Goff out there like a statue and expects to throw the ball 50 times probably loses. But they have the ability, and defensively, they have the ability to slow the 49ers attack down. They have the ability to beat the 49ers. So, if that happens, that's even greater because that just makes it so much easier than for the Saints to, because if they beat if the 49ers lose that game, now they got 3 losses. A 4th loss really makes sure, and the Packers losing really makes sure the Saints stay in the 1 or 2 seed. They get that first round bye. So, Lance also asked, why don't we run Murray and Dwayne Washington more? Well, Dwayne Washington, I doubt they give him any carries. Listen, I don't know if you heard at the beginning of the show, but Alvin Kamara was still fairly productive, averaging almost 5 yards a carry, and he's about to set a personal record for the amount of catches he's had in the season. But Murray, I think we need to get Zach Line healthy again to get Sean to run Murray more, because I think that the 49ers in particular were really stacking the box against the run, and that's why they try to do so many outside plays to try and get Kamara isolated one-on-one with somebody, one cut, and then he's gone. And it just wasn't working. But I think if Zach Line comes back next week, we will probably see a heavy dose of Murray this weekend on Monday night. I think we will see a heavy dose of him. Allison asked, do you think the Patriots, what kind of punishment do you think the Patriots are going to get? Oh, your favorite team. Sean, you want to take that one? You know about this, right?
Spygate,
Spygate the third, yeah.
They won't get any punishment whatsoever. They'll get slapped on the wrist and basically told, you're not supposed to do that. They won't do a thing to the Patriots. They didn't do anything to them the last time.
Well, they took their draft picks and destroyed the tapes. They went full Hillary Clinton on there. They bit it. They beat them with the hammers, and we never saw anything about it ever again. And I think they took a first-round draft pick from him. But, yeah, I would be surprised to see any significant punishment happen to the Patriots on this unless they can somehow prove that these guys were directed by Belichick to try and videotape, of all teams, the Bengals signals. What the hell? The only the signals they have are white flags. I mean, there's
to me, it's just it's almost as maddening as the officiating stuff, because you had the Spygate thing. Well, let me go back. You had the Deflategate.
Mm-hmm.
They talked to Belichick, and you never hear his name mentioned in any of it. And that was okay. Nothing ever happened to Belichick.
Well, they could have checked Brady's phone, but he smashed that with a hammer.
Yeah, and then you got Bountygate, where Goodell tells Peyton, you should know I'm holding you responsible for what happened on your watch. Well, I mean, what's the difference? He's the coach, he's the responsible one. The difference. Why is that any different in the Northeast Seaboard?
Because nobody was suing the NFL because of videotapes. They were suing the NFL because of hard hits, because of CTE. So yeah, that's why that punishment happened. You can't convince me of anything else other than that. Yeah. Yes, the Saints shouldn't have. First off, they wasn't a bounty, but that's a whole separate topic all by itself. But
the Saints were not doing anything that every other team in the league does.
They only got in trouble for
still does.
right. They got in trouble for the cover up, attempting to cover up the fact that it was still running this thing after they were told not to do it, and the punishment was far excessive.
Things are taking place, and they're just referred to as contract incentives.
It's everybody after the show tonight. Go to YouTube, type in ESPN Smash for Cash. Watch that clip. It's from the 1995 Super Bowl that was played in New Orleans, where Brett Favre and the Packers played the Bill Parcells, Drew Bledsoe, and the New England Patriots. And they talk exactly about what the Saints were trying to do. Because back then, the Packers were doing it, the Broncos were doing it, the Patriots were doing it. Everybody was doing this thing. It was an ego-led, and it was fed by the coaches, an ego-led bet, essentially. How many big plays you can get? How many interceptions can you get? How many big tackles can you get for losses? And if you get the most, we're going to throw our money in there. And it was an ego thing. I think it was Chris Dishman was talking about he was walking around the locker room with the money pinned to his chest because he won, obviously not his skin, his jersey. Obviously he won the pot because he got the most interceptions, and Reggie White talks about how he had to ask his wife for money because he promised the players X amount of dollars if you make interceptions and fumble recoveries in a championship game because he wanted to go to the Super Bowl, and that kind of stuff. So type in ESPN Smash for Cash. That's exactly what the Saints were doing because Greg Robertson and Greg Williams, Greg Robertson was the defensive coordinator for the Broncos back then, and Greg Williams come from the same Buddy Ryan tree of coaching, and they learned all the same motivational tricks. And you'll learn that the beaver is the hardest working, most industrious animal on the planet. That was just watch the clip, and that's what the Saints were running. And the Saints got in trouble because the league told them to stop it. They didn't. They tried to hide it, but the punishment was so damn excessive, and Goodell was making shit up to try and prove that they were coming down hard on this team when that's not what the Saints were doing at all. They were not trying to hurt people. They were not trying to take people out of the game. They weren't trying to do any of that stuff. They were just using money as a motivation to make big plays. That's all it was. So.
And that season in question, the Saints were penalized least of any team in the league for like flagrant fouls, personal fouls, and dirty play, basically.
Yeah. And they try and point to the Vikings, the NFC Championship game with the Vikings and the Saints. All the cheap shots on Brett Favre. Well, you know what? Go back and read Sean Payton's book. And he talks about that game. And he calls Brett Favre an old man. Have you ever read the book? Have you ever read Sean Payton's book?
I've tried to find it, and I can't.
Okay. Well, he talks about that game specifically, and he equates Brett Favre to an old man. And he says, when you're a young man and it's raining outside, you don't care. You're going to go where you're going to go. You don't drive any differently. You might drive a little more recklessly. Well, the older you get, the more careful you get. And when you become an old man, you suddenly don't want to go out when the weather's bad because you don't trust your driving skills anymore. So they equated Brett Favre to being the old man who doesn't want to go out in the rain. And the rain in this case, he doesn't want to go out there and play a physical game where people are hitting him, because then he's thinking more about the hits than he is about what he's supposed to be doing out there. So the Saints did intentionally go out there to go hit Favre, not to knock him out the game, but the remember me shots. Remember Greg Williams talked about that? Remember me shots? That's what it is. And man, I know what he did after he left the field is indefensible. I know he's a scumbucket for that, but my God, if you watch that play where Darren Sharper comes in like a damn missile, as soon as Brett Favre lets that ball go and just tags him, that is one of my favorite shots from that game of all the hits Brett Favre took in that game. Because when you watch that play, and I've got this game on DVD, when you watch that game and you see Brett Favre dropping back, the lane opens up, and you see Darren Sharper take off from about 20 yards back, hauling butt on a straight line for Favre. And as soon as Favre lets that ball go, bam, right here across the middle of the chest. Favre's chest caves in around the hit, and his head snaps back, and he's just laid out. And he gets up going, gritting his teeth. It is so friggin' awesome. And I'm a Brett Favre fan. But, man, I could watch that play all day long.
Yep.
So,
all right, well, I've got to make the donut.
I know. We need to talk about more about that game when we get time again, because I could talk about that game all the time because I was there, and it was just, man. Yeah. It was tough to sit through, but Sean, we never paid the bills. Pay the bills real quick, and that'll take us out of here.
Thank you guys for joining us this week on the Under the Dome podcast. We love you guys, and as always, you are as big a part of this show as we are. You can subscribe to our show on iTunes and on YouTube, and follow us on Facebook at Under the Dome podcast. Follow us on Twitter at 79 Saints and at Drew's Dad 3721. And we love communicating with you guys. You tell us what you like, what you don't like, what you want more of, and what you want less of, I guess, by the same token. To summarize, while it was painful, our season will not be defined by this game. We played a very, very good team that prepared incredibly good game plan for us, and yet and still we were in a position inside the last 2 minutes to win the game. And we played the cards right, get a little help along the way. We'll see the 49ers again. And I have no doubts that this time it'll be a little bit different. Did I forget anything?
I don't think you did. Hey, man, I had 49er fans talking smack with me before the game and smack with me after the game, too. And, it's just whatever. It was they were talking about destroying us. They didn't destroy us. They were talking about owning the dome. They didn't. They had some fans out there. I'm not going to deny that. But they're like freaking cockroaches. They only come out when they're halfway decent. When they suck, there ain't no 49er fans around. It's a fair weather fan club. So, screw those guys. Anyway, thank you guys for joining us. And Allison, you were 10 years old, going on 11 for that championship game. Your mama wanted to go. I know you're mad you didn't go to that game. You're mad you don't go to every game with me. So, you weren't. Next time we host an NFC Championship game, I'll try and get you to go with me. So, anyway, thank you guys for joining us. We'll see you next time on Under the Dome. Good night.